The first thing I noticed wasn't that the nursery was empty. It was the smell. Fresh paint. Someone had painted over the soft sage green walls I'd spent 3 weekends carefully finishing while I was 7 months pregnant. I stood frozen in the doorway. The crib was gone. The rocking chair my father had built before he passed away. Gone. The handmade bookshelf. Gone. Even the tiny cloud-shaped nightlight I'd bought the day I heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time. Gone. I honestly thought I'd walked into the wrong room. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice floating down the hallway. "Oh good, you're home." She sounded cheerful. Almost proud. I finally cleared all that baby stuff out. I slowly turned toward her. "You what?" She smiled as if she'd just done me the biggest favor in the world. "I donated everything this morning." I stared at her. Every word refused to make sense. Donated? Yes. She folded her arms. There was no reason to keep filling an entire room with baby furniture. My hands instinctively moved to my stomach. I was 34 weeks pregnant. Our daughter hasn't even been born. She sighed dramatically. Exactly. You don't know what you'll really need. I gave everything to a young couple from my church. They were so grateful. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked at the empty room one more time. Then I smiled. That's okay. She looked surprised. It is. Yes. Because there was one thing she didn't know. 3 days earlier, I'd signed the final papers to sell the house. And she had exactly 21 days to move out. If you'd met my mother-in-law Diane before all this happened, you probably would have liked her. Everyone did. She volunteered at church. Baked pies for neighborhood fundraisers. Never forgot a birthday. Always knew exactly what to say when someone was grieving. To everyone else she was generous. To me, she was generous as long as she remained in control. It took me years to understand the difference. My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and until I started maternity leave, I worked as an architectural project manager in Columbus, Ohio. Planning came naturally to me. Blueprints, budgets, deadlines, unexpected problems. My job was solving them before anyone else even noticed they existed. Unfortunately, I never imagined I'd need those same skills inside my own family. I met my husband Ryan almost 8 years earlier. He was kind in the quiet sort of way. Not flashy. Not loud. The kind of man who fixed things without being asked. He coached youth baseball on weekends. Called his grandmother every Sunday. And genuinely believed people deserved second chances. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with him. It also became his greatest weakness. Especially where his mother was concerned. Ryan was an only child. His father had passed away when he was 16. After that, he and Diane became incredibly close. Too close. First, I admired their relationship. A son taking care of his widowed mother seemed admirable. Then small things started happening. Diane had a key to our apartment. She'd stop by without calling. Rearrange kitchen cabinets because she thought her system worked better. Replace groceries she decided weren't healthy. Once she even donated a sweater she'd seen me wearing because she thought it made me look tired. Ryan always apologized. She means well. That sentence became the soundtrack of our marriage. When we bought our first home, I thought things would finally change. It was a beautiful 2-story craftsman house on a quiet street. 3 bedrooms. A fenced backyard. Enough space to someday raise a family. Ryan and I split the down payment evenly. The mortgage was comfortably within our budget. For the first year, life was peaceful. Then Diane's townhouse developed severe water damage after a burst pipe. Insurance covered part of the repairs. Not all. She needed somewhere to stay. Just for a month, Ryan promised. I agreed without hesitation. She was family. Of course she could stay. 30 days became 3 months. 3 months became 9. Then an entire year. Eventually, she stopped talking about moving back. Instead, she started referring to our house as home. The first serious argument happened over the dining room. I'd converted one corner into a small workspace for my architectural drawings. One afternoon I came home and found everything gone. My drafting table, storage shelves, even my ergonomic chair. In their place, a china cabinet. When I asked Diane what had happened, she looked genuinely confused. You weren't using that room properly. I work there. You work on a computer. The dining room should look like a dining room. Ryan convinced me to let it go. We'll figure something out. So I moved into the guest bedroom. Looking back, every compromise gave Diane permission to take a little more. 2 years later, after a long struggle with infertility, I finally became pregnant. Ryan cried when we heard the heartbeat. I cried because I'd almost stopped believing it would ever happen. Diane cried too. At least that's what I thought. Within a week, she'd started referring to the baby as our little girl. Not your baby. Not my granddaughter. Our little girl. The phrase made me uncomfortable. Whenever I gently corrected her, she'd laugh. Oh, you know what I mean. Did I? I'm not so sure anymore. Around my 5th month of pregnancy, Ryan was offered a promotion. It came with more responsibility, frequent travel, and a significant raise. We celebrated. Then reality settled in. He'd be away almost every other week until the baby arrived. I hate leaving you with all the nursery work. I'll survive. Diane immediately volunteered. I'll help Hannah. I forced a smile. Thanks. Inside, I wasn't nearly as excited. First, her help actually was helpful. She folded baby clothes, organized diapers, washed blankets. Then little things started changing. I'd buy neutral curtains. She replaced them with pink floral ones. I'd choose simple wooden shelves. She ordered oversized decorative cabinets. Every time I changed something back, she changed it again. Ryan never saw it. He was always traveling. One Saturday, I came home carrying a tiny handmade mobile I'd found at a local craft fair. The nursery door was closed. When I opened it, I stopped in my tracks. The crib had been moved to the opposite wall. The dresser had disappeared. 3 giant porcelain dolls now sat on the shelves. I stared in disbelief. Diane. She appeared behind me smiling. Isn't it prettier? I slowly turned. Where's the dresser? Oh. I moved it downstairs. Why? It made the room feel crowded. I took a long breath. This is Ryan's and my nursery. Please don't rearrange it without asking. Her smile disappeared. I was only helping. I know. But I need you to stop. She nodded. She even apologized. For exactly 2 days. Then something even stranger started happening. Packages addressed to me began arriving already opened. At first I blamed delivery damage. Until one afternoon I walked into the kitchen and found Diane reading the instruction manual for a baby monitor I'd ordered. She looked up without embarrassment. I wanted to make sure you bought a good one. I quietly took the box from her hands. Please don't open my mail. I wasn't snooping. I was helping. Helping. Always helping. At 32 weeks pregnant, my doctor recommended I reduce my workload. Everything with the baby looked healthy, but my blood pressure was climbing, so I began working from home more often. That's when I noticed something I'd completely missed before. Almost every weekday while I worked upstairs, Diane invited people into our house. Church friends, neighbors, women from volunteer groups. She proudly gave them tours. This is our living room. Our kitchen. Our nursery. Not their nursery. Not Hannah and Ryan's nursery. Ours. The final straw came when I overheard her telling one visitor, I've basically raised this baby already. I quietly closed my office door. For the first time, I stopped believing this would fix itself. The following Monday, while Ryan was away in Denver, I met with a real estate attorney during my lunch break. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted options. The house had increased substantially in value over the past few years. Legally, Ryan and I both owned it. Selling wasn't simple, but there were possibilities if we both agreed. That meeting unexpectedly changed everything, because the attorney asked one question I'd never considered. If your husband were offered enough profit to secure your family's future, would he move? I honestly didn't know. But 2 nights later, I found out. After showing Ryan the numbers, the potential equity, and a beautiful new home closer to his new office, he surprised me. I actually love this idea. So do I. We agreed to keep it quiet until everything was finalized. Especially from Diane. We didn't want unnecessary drama if the sale somehow fell through. 3 days ago, we signed the closing papers. The buyers requested possession in exactly 3 weeks. Everything was settled. Except one conversation. The one we still hadn't had with Diane. Which meant, on the exact same morning she proudly donated our baby's entire nursery to strangers. She unknowingly emptied a room inside a house that no longer belonged to us. And she was about to discover that she'd made a very expensive mistake. I stood in the doorway of the empty nursery for what felt like forever. The walls I'd painted. The furniture Ryan and I had spent months choosing. The little framed watercolor animals my sister had made by hand. Everything was gone. Not packed away. Not stored in the basement. Gone. Diane folded her arms proudly. The young couple was overwhelmed. They've been trying for years. I'm so happy I could help them. I finally found my voice. You gave away my father's rocking chair. She blinked. I assumed it came with the nursery. It was the last thing my father ever built. For the first time her smile faltered. I didn't know. You never asked. She immediately switched to the tone I had heard dozens of times before. Well, things are just things. You can always buy another chair. I looked at the empty corner where my father had imagined rocking his future grandchild. No, I can't. My father died before he ever met my daughter. That chair is the only thing he built for her. Diane looked uncomfortable, but instead of apologizing, she became defensive. I was trying to bless another family. You should appreciate that. I nodded slowly. I appreciate generosity. What I don't appreciate is someone giving away property that wasn't theirs. That evening Ryan returned from Denver. The moment he walked inside, he knew something was wrong. He looked at me, then at Diane, then at the nursery. What happened? Before I could answer, Diane smiled. I surprised Hannah. Ryan walked into the nursery. He looked around in complete silence. Then he turned. Where's the crib? I donated it. The dresser? Donated. The rocking chair? Also donated. Ryan stared at his mother. You gave away everything? She laughed nervously. You two were going to buy newer things anyway. Neither of us had ever said that. Not once. Ryan slowly walked back downstairs. He sat beside me at the kitchen table. His voice stayed calm. Mom, why didn't you ask us first? I didn't think you'd mind. Why? Because I'm family. Ryan nodded once. So are we. The room became very quiet. For the first time since I'd known him, Ryan wasn't trying to smooth things over. He wasn't translating his mother's behavior. He wasn't asking me to compromise. He simply waited. Diane eventually crossed her arms. I think you're both overreacting. Ryan looked at me. Can you give us a minute? I quietly walked onto the back patio. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. Even through the closed door I could hear their voices. Not shouting. Just firm. 20 minutes later Ryan stepped outside. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize for someone else's choices. I should have stopped this years ago. His voice sounded exhausted. I kept thinking she'd eventually respect boundaries. And he gave a sad smile. I confused hope with reality. That night we finally talked about the house. Not the nursery. The house. Ryan looked at the closing documents spread across our dining table. We can't keep hiding this. I know. When do you want to tell her? I thought about it. Tomorrow. He nodded. Together. The next morning Diane was making coffee when Ryan sat down across from her. I need to tell you something. She smiled. About the nursery? No. About the house. Her expression changed immediately. What about it? Ryan took my hand. We sold it. She laughed. No, seriously. I'm serious. Her smile disappeared. What do you mean you sold it? The closing happened 3 days ago. She stared at us. You can't. We already did. No. This is my home. Ryan spoke gently. It's our home. And in 21 days, it becomes someone else's. I had expected tears. Maybe anger. What I hadn't expected was laughter. Diane actually laughed. You two are trying to scare me. Ryan quietly slid the closing documents across the table. She read the first page. Then the second. Her hands began shaking. You sold my house? I answered before Ryan could. No. We sold ours. She pushed the papers away. What about me? Ryan spoke carefully. We've already found you an apartment near your church. I don't want an apartment. It's a very nice place. I don't care. I'm staying here. Ryan slowly shook his head. You can't. The buyers take possession in 3 weeks. I'll tell them no. I almost smiled. It doesn't work like that. For the next several days, the atmosphere inside the house became painfully tense. Diane barely spoke to either of us. But something else changed too. She started making phone calls behind closed doors. Whenever I entered the room, the conversations ended. One afternoon I walked into the kitchen and she quickly folded a handwritten list. It disappeared into her purse. When I asked what she was working on, she smiled. Church fundraiser. Maybe. Maybe not. A week later, my next prenatal appointment lasted longer than expected. Everything with the baby looked wonderful. My blood pressure had finally improved. As we walked toward the parking lot, Ryan squeezed my hand. I've been thinking. About what? The nursery. I know how much that chair meant. We'll replace what we can. I smiled. The furniture isn't what hurts. I know. It's the choice. Exactly. The nursery could be rebuilt. Trust couldn't. The following Saturday we went shopping for replacement furniture. The baby wasn't due for another month. There was still enough time. We ordered a new crib, a changing table, bookshelves, even another rocking chair. Not to replace my father's. Nothing ever could. But to create new memories. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt hopeful. That feeling lasted until Monday morning. I returned home carrying a folder from my doctor's office. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the living room was full of cardboard boxes. Not ours. Someone else's. 3 strangers stood inside my kitchen. A middle-aged couple and a younger man wearing a tape measure around his neck. The woman smiled. Oh good. You must be Diane's daughter. I frowned. I'm sorry. She pointed toward Diane. She said she'd already rented us the downstairs beginning next month. My heart stopped. What? Just then Diane walked into the hallway. She looked completely calm. Oh, you're home early. I stared at her. Who are these people? She answered as though this were perfectly normal. My new tenants. Ryan wasn't home. The buyers hadn't taken possession yet. And somehow, my mother-in-law had started renting out rooms inside a house she no longer owned. What she didn't realize was that one of the 3 strangers standing in my kitchen wasn't there to rent anything. He was the licensed home inspector working for the new owners. And he just heard every word. For a few seconds nobody moved. The woman standing in my kitchen smiled awkwardly. Did we come at a bad time? Before I could answer, the man with the tape measure quietly pulled an identification badge from his pocket. He looked at Diane. Mrs. Keller? She smiled confidently. Yes. My name is Thomas Avery. I'm the licensed home inspector hired by the buyers. The color drained from Diane's face. The buyers? Yes. I was scheduled to inspect the property this morning before final possession. He looked around the room. I wasn't expecting prospective tenants. Neither was I. The couple exchanged confused looks. The woman frowned. Diane told us she owned the home. Ryan had just walked through the front door. He stopped beside me. I'm Ryan. I'm sorry you've been brought into this. He glanced at his mother. My wife and I own this house. We sold it. The closing has already been completed. The younger couple looked stunned. Then they slowly turned toward Diane. You told us this was your property. Diane forced a laugh. It's a family misunderstanding. Thomas, the inspector, quietly cleared his throat. I don't think it is. The couple apologized repeatedly before leaving. I promise we didn't know. I believe you, I said. You were told something that wasn't true. Once they drove away, the house fell silent. Ryan looked at his mother. Why? She folded her arms. I needed income. You never asked us. You were throwing me out. We found you an apartment. I didn't want an apartment. Ryan took a slow breath. So your solution was to rent out a house that isn't yours? She looked away. You wouldn't understand. No, I don't. Thomas finished his inspection while the three of us sat in complete silence. An hour later, he handed me his report. Everything looked good. Then he lowered his voice. I probably shouldn't say this. I smiled politely. What is it? When I arrived this morning, your mother-in-law was showing those people around the entire house. Okay. She also told them the nursery furniture belonged to her. Ryan looked at me. I already knew what he was thinking. The nursery. The donations. After Thomas left, Ryan turned to his mother. I need the name of the family you gave the nursery to. She hesitated. Why? Because we're going to ask for my father-in-law's rocking chair back. They've probably already assembled everything. I don't care. She sighed dramatically. I'll think about it. Ryan's voice became firmer than I'd ever heard before. No. You'll tell us now. She finally admitted the furniture had gone to a young couple from her church. Their names were Michael and Sarah Lawson. Ryan called the church office that afternoon. The pastor answered. Within 20 minutes he called us back. Hannah. I'm terribly sorry. What happened? The Lawsons had no idea. Diane told them all the furniture belonged to her. She said you had decided not to keep any of it. I closed my eyes. Even now, she hadn't simply taken our things. She'd invented an entirely different story. The pastor arranged a meeting for the following evening. I was nervous. Not because of the furniture. Because I didn't want another family to feel guilty over something that wasn't their fault. When we arrived, Michael and Sarah were already waiting. Sarah looked close to tears. The moment she saw me, she stood. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You don't have to apologize. Diane said. Her voice broke. She said your pregnancy had become high risk and you decided not to prepare a nursery anymore because it was too painful. Ryan looked down. I simply stared. I hadn't just been lied about. My unborn daughter had been used to make the lie believable. Sarah reached into her purse. We've been waiting to give you this. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten inventory. Every item they'd received. The crib. The changing table. The blankets. The books. Then I saw it. Handmade oak rocking chair. Sarah smiled softly. We haven't unpacked anything. If it's yours, please take it home. For the first time in days, I cried. The next morning, Ryan rented a moving truck. Michael insisted on helping. Within 2 hours, almost every piece of nursery furniture was back in our garage. Not everything. Some blankets had already been washed. A few decorations had been hung. Sarah apologized over and over. I hugged her. You've done nothing wrong. You believed someone you trusted. I know what that feels like. I thought things couldn't get any more surprising. I was wrong. That afternoon, the buyer's real estate agent called. There seems to be one final issue. What happened? The buyers are concerned. About what? The inspection notes mention an occupant claiming ownership. I sighed. I understand. They'd like written confirmation that the property will be vacant on possession day. Of course. Ryan immediately agreed. No arguments. No hesitation. But when Diane overheard the conversation, she exploded. You promised I'd always have a home. Ryan looked genuinely heartbroken. I promised I'd always help you. That's different. I never promised this house forever. You chose your wife over your own mother. Ryan quietly answered. I chose my family. You are my family. So are Hannah and our daughter. And it's time I stopped pretending those responsibilities are equal. The room fell completely silent. 4 years. I'd waited for Ryan to say something like that. Not because I wanted him to reject his mother. Because I needed him to recognize that protecting our marriage wasn't betrayal. It was commitment. 2 days before possession, movers arrived. Most of Diane's belongings had already been packed. She barely spoke to either of us. Then, just as the last box was carried outside, she walked into the nursery. The room was beautiful again. The new crib had arrived. The walls were freshly painted. My father's rocking chair sat quietly beside the window. She looked around for several seconds. Then she whispered, I was only trying to help. I answered honestly, no. You were trying to decide. There is a difference. She didn't respond. She simply walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea she had one final surprise planned for moving day. And this time, it wouldn't be aimed at the nursery. It would be aimed at the sale itself. Moving day arrived with clear skies and an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in months, I woke up without feeling anxious about walking into my own kitchen. Ryan made pancakes. I sat at the table with one hand resting on my belly, feeling our daughter kick as if she somehow knew a new chapter was beginning. "Today's the day," he said, smiling. "It is. We made it." I smiled back. "I think we did." I honestly believed the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The moving truck had already left with our furniture. Our bags were packed. The new homeowners were scheduled to arrive at noon for the final walkthrough. At 11:15, the doorbell rang. Ryan opened it. Standing outside were 2 police officers. My heart immediately dropped. One of the officers spoke politely. "We received a report regarding a property dispute." Ryan frowned. "A property dispute?" "Yes." The caller claimed the home was being sold fraudulently, and that an elderly resident was being illegally removed. I didn't need anyone to tell me who had made the call. One officer asked if everyone could sit down. Ryan calmly handed them a folder. Inside were the closing documents, the deed, the purchase agreement, the possession schedule. Everything was neatly organized. The younger officer flipped through the paperwork before looking up. "Mrs. Keller still lives here?" "For another 45 minutes, Ryan answered. "Then the buyers take possession." The older officer nodded. "This appears to be a civil matter." He looked at Diane. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing ownership?" She stood silently. "No." "Any lease agreement?" "No." "Any life estate?" "No." The officer's voice remained kind. "Then these documents control." Diane looked at Ryan with tears in her eyes. "So that's it. You're choosing paperwork over your mother?" Ryan shook his head. "I'm choosing the truth. I offered to help you move. I found you an apartment. I offered to pay the first year's rent. You refused every solution because it wasn't the one you wanted." For the first time since I'd known her, Diane had no response. After the officers left, the house became very quiet. About 20 minutes later, the buyers arrived. Emma and David Collins, a couple in their early 30s expecting their first child. They immediately apologized. "We're so sorry this has been stressful." I smiled. "It isn't your fault." Emma looked toward the nursery. "I heard there was some confusion." I laughed softly. "That's one way to describe it." As part of the walkthrough, I showed them every room. When we reached the nursery, Emma stopped. "It's beautiful." I smiled. "Thank you." She looked at the rocking chair. "That's a family piece?" "It is. My dad built it." She smiled. "I hope your daughter spends a lot of time there." "So do I." There was something unexpectedly comforting about seeing another young family excited about the house. Instead of feeling like I was losing something, I finally felt like we were passing it on. Just as everyone gathered in the living room to exchange keys, Diane suddenly stood. "There is something everyone should know." Ryan sighed quietly. "Mom." She ignored him. She looked directly at Emma and David. "You shouldn't buy this house." The room fell silent. Emma looked confused. "Why?" Diane took a deep breath. "This house has never been happy." Ryan closed his eyes. "Please don't." She continued anyway. "They're making a mistake. They're abandoning family. They'll regret it." I expected Emma to become uncomfortable, and said, She smiled gently. Then she said something none of us expected. "My grandmother used to say something similar whenever anyone moved." Diane frowned. "What?" "She believed every house belonged to the people who filled it with kindness." Emma looked around the room. "I don't think houses remember arguments. I think people do." Then she turned to me. "And from everything I've seen today, you're making the right decision." That simple sentence seemed to end the argument. Not dramatically, not loudly, just, finally. Diane picked up her purse. Without another word, she walked outside. Ryan watched from the window as she got into her car. "I hope someday she understands." I slipped my hand into his. "So do I." 3 weeks later, our daughter arrived. Healthy. 7 pounds 6 ounces. The first person to hold her after Ryan and me wasn't a nurse. It was my older sister. She carefully carried her into the nursery of our new home. The rocking chair sat beside a large window overlooking a small garden. Exactly where I'd always imagined it. Ryan smiled. I think your dad would have loved this room. I looked at the chair. I think so too. About a month after the birth, something unexpected happened. There was a knock at our front door. Ryan opened it. Diane stood outside. She looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence she'd always carried was gone. Instead, she held a small cardboard box. I won't stay long. Ryan stepped aside. She walked in quietly, then placed the box on the dining table. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Ryan as a little boy. His father. Family holidays. Birthday parties. At the bottom of the box sat a folded envelope. She pushed it toward me. I owe you an apology. I opened the envelope. It wasn't long. Simply said, Hannah. I kept convincing myself I was helping because admitting I wanted control was harder. I crossed boundaries that were never mine to cross. Giving away the nursery was my decision. The consequences were mine too. I'm sorry, Diane. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. Thank you. She nodded. I don't expect forgiveness today. I know. I just wanted to stop pretending I was the victim. Healing wasn't immediate. Ryan and I set clear boundaries. Visits only by invitation. No spare house key. No entering rooms without asking. No decisions about our daughter without our permission. For the first time in our marriage, those boundaries weren't debated. They were respected. Not because we demanded them, because everyone finally understood what happened when they weren't. Today our daughter is 3 years old. She loves storybooks, muddy rain boots, and insists every stuffed animal needs its own bedtime blanket. Sometimes she'll climb into the rocking chair with me and ask, "Who made this?" I always smile. "Your great-grandpa." "And who kept it safe?" I look at Ryan, then back at her. We did. Because in the end, the nursery was never really about furniture. It was about respect. The house was never really about real estate. It was about building a home where love didn't mean surrendering your boundaries. People often remember this story because of the title. They think the biggest surprise was that my mother-in-law gave away my baby's nursery without realizing I'd already sold the house. But that wasn't the real surprise. The real surprise was discovering that sometimes the strongest thing you can do for your family isn't holding on to a house. It's having the courage to leave one behind and build a home where every decision, every memory, and every child's future is protected by mutual respect instead of someone else's control.